Hi folks, Seth Leapson here. Thanks for watching my monologue. In these uncertain times, you may be thinking about personal protection. If you are, I urge you to visit my friends at Guns Etc. They'll help you find the perfect protection for yourself and your family, and they can even teach you how to use it. They've been protecting Arizonans for over 33 years, and they stand for the great principles this country was founded upon. Or you can just click on gunsetc.com. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Welcome back and happy November 19th, 2020. 157 years ago, President Abraham Lincoln said this at Gettysburg. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who gave their lives that the nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Children in school used to memorize that speech. Now they don't even learn it or about it. Harry Jaffa reminds us that as Soviet tanks were crushing the Hungarian Revolution of 1956, the final message of the Hungarian freedom fighters, broadcast on the Free Hungarian radio system, was a reading of the Gettysburg Address. The reading was not completed, however, it was cut off by the sound of gunfire. Some 60 years later, however, the Soviet tanks are gone, as is the Soviet Union, and the reading of the Gettysburg Address can resume. We might even be able to say that Lincoln's words, like Jefferson's, have proved more powerful than tyranny and despotism. But hold that thought. Harry Jaffa wrote that about 20 years ago. And what the Soviets tried to do to Lincoln in his words and Jefferson and his was done here, in the country that gave the world Lincoln and Jefferson. I ask if your school teaches this address anymore. I point out that statues of both Jefferson and Lincoln were toppled, taken down in various cities this year by rioters in our summer of love. What the Soviets couldn't do to Hungarian freedom fighters, our own Americans did and continue to do to ourselves, to fellow Americans. Milan Kundera writes, the first step in liquidating a people is to eradicate its memory, destroy its books, its culture, its history, then have somebody write new books, manufacture a new culture, invent a new history. Before long, the nation will begin to forget what it is and what it was. The world around it will forget even faster. At what point do we forget who we are and what we are? The historian Wilfred Maclay writes, quote, for the human animal, meaning is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Without it, we perish. Historical consciousness is to civilized society what memory is to individual identity. Without memory, and without the stories by which our memories are carried forward, we cannot say who or what we are. Without them, our life and thought dissolve into a meaningless, unrelated rush of events. A meaningless, unrelated rush of events. As Professor Maclay goes on, a culture without memory will necessarily be barbarous and easily tyrannized, even if it is technologically advanced. The necessary waves of daily events will occupy all our attention, to feed all our efforts, to connect past, present, and future, thereby diverting us from an understanding of the human things that unfold in time, including the paths of our own lives. Thank God the men at Gettysburg, and so many great men since, could void distraction, not succumb to it, knew who we were and are, and were not defeated in their efforts to connect past, present, and future. It's a worry about the culture I do have now. Wipe away, destroy Lincoln and Jefferson, our founding, and the great distraction and liquidation of a people can commence. It's primed to commence. But not here. Our project is restoration. Perhaps we might even call it a new birth of freedom, what we have to do and what the task before us is. For as Harry Jaffa writes, for Abraham Lincoln, the terrible sacrifices exacted upon the battlefield of Gettysburg and upon 10,000 other battlefields of the Civil War could be vindicated only by a new birth of freedom. Lincoln called upon us, the living, to be dedicated to the unfinished work thus far advanced by the honored dead. Lincoln made clear that work was when he said that the nation at its conception had been dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. The war had come because many Americans had turned their backs on this defining axiom, some calling it a self-evident lie, others arguing that it applied only to superior races. For its defenders, slavery was far from being an anomaly, an evil temporarily entailed upon the new republic from its colonial past. Instead, it became, to them, a positive good, and they devoted themselves to strengthen, perpetuate, and extend it. Lincoln and members of his parties had been elected to office because, in light of what they held to be the self-evident truths of the Declaration of Independence, they thought slavery a great moral wrong, whose extension into newly organized territories and into the states to be formed from those territories should be prevented by law. Restricted thus, they believed slavery would be placed lawfully and constitutionally in the course of ultimate extinction. John Stuart Mill, writing from England, understood this well, defending this exact point and writing, "The day when slavery can no longer extend itself is the day of its doom. The slave owners know this, and it is the cause of their fury. They know, as all know, who have attended to the subject, that confinement within existing limits is a death warrant." Now I ask, for those who continue to think it important, or rather defining, that slavery is the founding point of our country, isn't it interesting that those people, want to obliterate, defenestrate, change, and rewrite our history to make it appear that slavery is our essence? Thus, they tear down the statues of the great emancipator, quit teaching him, change our founding from 7 years prior to 1863, and make it some other arbitrary date that shows not freedom and equality, but their opposites, though that arbitrary date was never considered until last year a date of our founding or a date of any importance at all. In other words, their effort is to make slavery, and not its elimination, based on our founding ethos, the defining point of America. And to do that, they have to eliminate and distort our very history, as if the year 1776 and the years 1861 to 1865 never existed at all. That's the task of the left today, and it has both its shock troops on the streets as well as its intellectual catalysts in the academy. It goes back and deep into the progressive movement in America. Consider this from one of the founders of the progressive movement in America, Woodrow Wilson. Quote, "If you want to understand the real Declaration of Independence, do not repeat the preface. Make a new table of contents. Make a new set of counts in the indictment. Make a new statement of the things you mean to set right, and then call all the civilized world to witness We are not bound to adhere to the doctrines held by the signers of the Declaration of Independence. We are as free as they were to make and unmake governments. We are not here to worship men or a document. It is no fetish. Its words lay no compulsion upon the thought of any free man." Close quote. Well, thank God the men who fought to the song with the lyrics, "As he died to make men holy, we shall die to make men free," didn't think the way Woodrow Wilson did. Think for a moment what Wilson was saying about the preface to the Declaration of Independence and how it could be gotten rid of. Eliminate it, so that you then eliminate the call to inalienable individual rights and the responsibility of a just government to secure them. It's always curious to me how the words the progressives here want to ignore or eliminate from our history are the very words freedom lovers and protesters in other countries discover and raise, be they in Hungary in the 1950s, or Tiananmen, or Hong Kong, or Tehran. Thank God, as I say, we have those words with us still, even if hard to find, even if dusty and hoary and contemned by our modern left. I point out that a month ago, though it didn't gain much attention, Donald Trump created a 1776 commission. That's a both beautiful and tragic thing. Beautiful that we had a president and several great scholars dedicated to the words and meanings and teachings of 1776. Tragic because we need a presidential commission to promote them. Recall what Jaffa warned about once. In 1776, we were nothing promising to become everything. Today we are everything promising to become nothing. The question is, can we summon up what we once had and go back as if full circle, like a true revolution, to Ronald Reagan's greatest wish, a new birth of freedom based on an informed patriotism? Or will rather the modern age leave us in the place where patriotism remains a down market commodity, and we, like so many animals other than rational, remove our foundation and what we thought were our final and permanent doctrines from memory and education, and just be forced to jump from lily pad to lily pad in life into a meaningless and through a meaningless, unrelated rush of events? That, as the national anthem, is a question. It's also our major question today. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.